You're listening to the Archaeology Podcast Network.
Welcome to episode 33 of A Life in Ruins podcast, where we investigate the careers of those living a life in ruins. I'm your host, Carlton Gover, and I am joined by my co-hosts, Connor Johnnon and David Howe. In this episode, we are interviewing Dr. Marissa Molinar. She studies the practices and products of prehistoric art through an evolutionary, social, and aesthetic lens. She gave an excellent talk at the APN Educational Expo about her work, and she also had a pretty sweet Zoom background. We have yet to talk about the American Southwest here on the podcast, so we are really excited to have her on the show this evening. Dr. Molinar, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. I am slowly no longer living the irony of your title of your show. You know, when I got invited, I'm like, yeah, I get it. That's so cute. Life in ruins. I'm an archaeologist. I'm like, oh my God, my life might be in ruins. I'm doing well. Getting used to that doctor thing though.
Yeah, how's it feel?
Still doesn't really kind of, feel right. I just accepted a new job, in this sort of post-COVID, but at least for me, post-dissertation world. I just needed to chill for a minute, before running back to like academia. Whether it be faculty, a museum gig, like a sweet one, probably would have lured me for sure. But I just was like, I just need a break. So looked in and I accepted a teaching position. And they teach science again, as I did that in between masters and PhDs, to my sixth graders now. And hang out by the beach with my kids for a little bit.
That honestly sounds like a wonderful life, and I'm kind of jealous of that. But
well, thank you. It definitely, it's not the highest paid, but you get summers off, and so I can go do field work or research or do guest lecturing or professor at universities during the summers. When I was an undergraduate, I had a classics minor, and I'm a super nerd, so I also did a minor honors thesis as well as the major. But Dr. Maverly, man, she was a specialist in ancient Greek. But she taught in spring semester 2 classes, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. She went in at 9. She had office hours at 11, and her day was done by 12. And she went every summer to the Greek university to teach. And I'm like, how can I be you? How can I?
Yeah.
Yes. Sign me up for that gig. Absolutely.
Right. I already knew I wanted to be an archaeologist, but I was just like, it's still kind of vague when you're like a junior, like, how will that work? How will that be? And then just watching her, I was like, yeah. And then the classes she taught, it was the grandeur that was Greece. And the other one was the glory that was Rome. I'm like, epic. It was, very, very cool. I suggested to anybody, take the classic, because I just didn't want anthropology as the four-field discipline to take away all the romance I had for archaeology.
Yeah, I could definitely, at least like the Colorado program I went through and the Wyoming program, we didn't have like strong classics or anything like that. So you kind of, prehistory in Colorado isn't that interesting when you're talking about like the Romans and the Greeks and everything like that.
I find it because, all right, I even took a note to say this. So let's all agree as archaeologists to use the term, and not just because I coined it myself, paleohistory rather than prehistory.
I get down with that.
It's all through my dissertation because that word, that term has always bothered me. It makes no sense. There's no time before history. History is basically the 0 point. Everything going forward, you've already got history.
Yeah, I use mostly pre-contact anytime I'm talking about.
When you're like specifically talking about like the New World. Yeah,
that's usually what I refer to because I dropped that whole prehistoric and all those connotations.
Yeah, we would just say paleohistoric, and that way you can say you have the globe.
Ooh.
Because you think about the other disciplines. Paleobotany, okay, paleoclimatology. Did they say pre-climatology or pre-botany? No, because it makes no sense. So why say prehistory? We're like, we can evolve and stop basing it on the written word.
Absolutely. I totally agree with that. I'm going to have to start adopting it. What paper do I cite for that?
Marissa's forthcoming dissertation. I'll send you actually a few citations of it.
Ooh, I'm excited.
That brings me to my next question. I noticed you had said that in your presentation I saw for the APN Expo, which was about, I guess you were comparing two rock art panels that were in two different parts of the U.S. Do you want to talk about that real quick?
Sure. Okay, so my dissertation, which at many points, according to my chair, Ken Sassman.
Oh, you can't with your chair? Cool.
Yes. And Alan was my area expert because no one at the University of Florida did anything near close to what I was doing. You know, I mean, the fact that I got a McKnight Fellowship and they only fund STEM people, that was, a miracle in itself. I swear to this day, they only picked me because they were like, ooh, that sounds cool. That's it. But anyway, so in researching COSO, because basically there was only one book prior to that and a lot of articles written by David Whitley, and then Alan Garfinkel Gold kind of started reinvestigating and relooking at it, but it's closed off because it's located in the southeastern part of California on China Lake, which is China Lake NAS, Navy Air Weapon Development. Top secret. It was always kind of crazy for me to go there because, I had to go through all sorts of security clearances prior. But the fact that I was going to a top secret weapons base to study upwards to 15,000-year-old rock art.
Yeah, that's a cool archaeology story.
Yeah, that's a kind of weird juxtaposition, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Right?
It's super cool.
And then, I had to go through all kinds, range courses to go into restricted zones. Oh, and then there's just these beautiful canyons. So, yeah, and it's also considered probably the largest concentration of petroglyphs, definitely in the Northern Hemisphere. Some people might argue the Western. Yeah, it's pretty crazy. Huh. It's also the first time ever that I had to do solo archaeology because, as you guys know, it's a team sport.
Absolutely.
It's like, okay, so I'm doing this by myself in this largest concentration on this top secret base. Oh, what in the world? I was escorted the whole time by a UXO, that's called an unexploded ordnance officer, because it is a testing ground.
Oh, that's so metal.
I know, right? I am metal, though. That's true.
I'm getting the sense already. We're 8 minutes in. I'm like, all right.
Yeah, so yeah, Jake was awesome. I called him Hurt Locker. Yeah, he called me Foxy Indiana Jones, and I called him Kurt Locker, so I was like, our little... I mean, I even had a call signal, because so the base archaeologist, the one who granted all this cool stuff, I mean, he had me send in pretty much anything I'd ever written, not even just about COSO or prior, just everything that I'd ever done. And after you put all that together, and then I had to write a proposal. And
so you got insanely vetted.
Yeah. And he came back when they told me, or Alan, he's like, you got 30 days. That's unheard of. And access to all 7 canyons. I even talked him into letting me shoot at night in Little Pet. It was great. It was my first time, because I'm a photographer too, as well as an illustrator. And even when I was doing my archaeology, I was always doing the photos, doing the, mapping, drawing. So yeah, that was just another amazing experience, just to see the canyons in that kind of light. Prior to that research and then even going there, but literally prior to it, I was looking at another Campbell Grant book, and it's The Rock Art of Canyon de Chelly. And that's in near the Grand Canyon, Arizona. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Canyon de Chelly.
Nope, not a rock art guy.
Okay. Well, I mean, but it has a lot of some of the earliest archaic for the Southwest, like burials. It's not just rock art.
Oh.
There's habitation and everything. That's what makes it such an interesting site and place. Yeah. I mean, oh goodness, it's in my dissertation. They found a gorgeously intact burial with shoes and clothing. I mean, you just name it. It was crazy.
Wow.
Yeah, wow.
Yes. Exactly, right? Just beautiful. And which also served a lot of my rock art dissertation because, I was looking at hairstyles and seeing how they were depicted across, the Southwest and the far West, COSO. So just knowing that no one knew anything about COSO and how old COSO was. It's so old, that's what we call it. And that's just the COSO range. of mountains, they're so old, they don't have a cultural name. They are the ancestor to everything. There's no other culture we know that's older than the people that produced this. The oldest piece of rock art, Big Mama, the oldest one dated so far. It is about 15,000, maybe 14 to 15,000 years old.
Whoa.
Yeah. Art.
That's early.
Art.
Yeah.
Okay, not lithics, not postal, you know what I'm saying? Art. Since they're so old, I knew it was going to kind of be a to and fro. All you really have from the people, the coastal people, the coastal culture, is this amazing body of rock art. 200,000 images across about maybe 8 to 9 canyons in this one little area here in the Coso Range. And I mean, everything is just covered. And there's only one canyon, Big Petroglyph Canyon, has like a lot of examples of what we call superposition. So you guys know that archaeologically, but it's the same thing for rock art, one over on top of the other, but not in a sort of defaced kind of way either. More of like an accretion, like making comprehensive, adding to. But that's the only artifact, cultural product we have. Everything else just kind of falls into line with your typical archaic, Paleo-Indian, Pueblo, sort of time sequence that we've already set out as far as like tools, habitat, what kind of food they would have grabbed. But as far as who they were, nothing except the rock art. So with that being said, I knew that I had to go, of course, to adjacent, both in time and region, to the Coso and start there. Start looking at the rock art there. But just saying, okay, that certain models, that testable models come out of it. And then you start doing more research, cultural research, known vetted cultural research. And then the more connections you find, the more you can say with, increasing certainty, your hypotheses, that there's definitely, because one of my major hypotheses was, does the rock art of Coso Range demonstrate a point of visual cultural continuity across, from the far west to the southwest, Four Corners region? And yeah, it did in the craziest ways ever. I mean, I found example after example after example, so much so that I would find examples from different authors, very well vetted, who had said, okay, this is the first example of this image that we've seen in the Southwest. There's none older. Yet I would have a Coso version that was exactly the same.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. Exactly the same. Where I could just overlay it. And then there was just that, what Grant called in his first book, and the main book written on the Coso Range, 1968, I think, rock drawings of the Coso. He had towards the end, and it's at a minor site, he called it enigmatic image. And it really was, because, the way it just kind of stands up, and it's got the hunchback, so it kind of has the early, hunchback Kokopelli action, some antlers, it's got this huge concentric circle next to it, an atlatl, a bighorn sheep coming out of the crack. There's even the little sort of misty seeds and the fringe on the backpack. And it's unlike anything in the Coso. And that's saying a lot, considering there's like 100,000 images, of anthropomorphs. And there's nothing like it anywhere at all. And it's a full-on panel. It's stocked. It's got like everything. This is like, what we would call, a masterpiece, if, modern canonical art, the Last Supper kind of level,
Oh boy.
Fully done, fully executed.
I don't think I've ever heard anyone compare North American rock art to like the Last Supper, and I'm here for it.
Yeah, I'm an art historian as well as an archaeologist. Like I went to London for grad school because I got to get my MA in comparative art and archaeology. And I'm like, damn it, that's right. That's what, just why should it be squat? Got to look at art making from an archaeological perspective. So anyway, so I am like doing, research, whatever. And so I get that Canyon de Chelly book that I mentioned before. This one, 10 years later, published 1978 by Campbell Grant. And when he's getting a little bit further to like maybe Pueblo II, if not even later, in his discussion of rock art for that region. He shows this image from New Mexico. It's in the, oh goodness, what is the name of the name escapes me, but anyway, it's in New Mexico. It's a pretty famous area in New Mexico for rock art, and this panel is well known for Southwest people over there. It is the exact same composition, but just basically executed in the imagery and style of the time it was done. So in the Coso, you have this sort of, you have the horned, but this tall figure, elongated body. It's got the backpack and all that. The one in New Mexico, which is thousands of years later and maybe about thousands of miles away, you have it done in that shorter squat style that you guys may have seen before if you've ever seen sort of Kachina style dolls. That's sort of
absolutely,
boxy kind of way of drawing. All right, so you have that, and then behind it, the cloud terrace. It also has antlers, the horned headdress. It also has the hump. They're both holding the staffs, but the difference in the staffs, the one that's in New Mexico, by this point, they have agriculture, so it's got more of the beating stick for seeds, whereas the Coso one, they're paleo, they're hunter and gatherers. His is the atlatl.
Oh.
Interesting.
Yeah, and they both, right in the exact same spot, have the same concentric circle, same number of rings, with the same emergence point in the exact same area. They both have a sort of a symbol that is associated with the female spirit. In the Coso, it is the bird foot. So you have like there's just this disembodied, bird foot, three little thing, three toes, a little bit of a leg, the shin, I guess. Is that what you call it on the bird? Just a little bit there. And in the same spot, corresponding spot with the New Mexico one is the vulva or the hooved, image. So, you might have seen that before too. It just kind of looks like a hoof, but it's also the vulva form. Then they have, so the bighorn sheep is coming out of the crack in the Coso one. And then in the New Mexico one, there's a crack too, but now we have some corn growing. So there's their subsistence spaces right there. Same exact thing, same location, but the difference is what they're sustaining. So we have our paleo hunter and gatherers eating some sheep in action. And then, and don't forget, like the sheep is not just literally pure food. It is taken on, it is the supernatural. And just as much with the groups in New Mexico at that time, corn took on that same sacredness, which I'm sure you're also familiar with, corn gods, corn maidens. And so the same thing would be true for the bighorn sheep, Okay, I got it. The relational ontology. There it is.
Heck yeah. So we'll talk a little bit more about this on the next segment and kind of like talk about, these big conclusions, which you've obviously mentioned, some of those already. But yeah, so we're interviewing Dr. Marissa Molinar. We will catch you at the next segment.
Welcome back to episode 33 of A Life in Ruins. We are back here with Dr. Marissa Molinar. And Dr. Molinar, you were just talking to us about some of these cross-regional comparisons in rock arts, even though they were part of the same style. But you were talking to us about like different temporal objects and changes between this. Clearly, if we're talking about like Pueblo II period, like 14,000 years of like artistic continuation between what's going on near the Grand Canyon and New Mexico. So yeah, we're pretty excited to hear more about it.
And not near the Grand Canyon either.
Oh, where was it?
California.
There we go.
Yeah. So it was in looking at rock art that began from Canyon to Shea, but extended further into the Four Corners region and Southwest from Grant Campbell's second book, that I was able to see these two images. At first I kind of was like, how the hell? Because then I realized he doesn't comment on it. And I'm like, holy shit, he didn't notice.
He just mum on it.
And it's his books. Those where I saw, it's where I saw one image and I saw the other image in his other book.
Wow.
And yeah. And I was like, and I went and I looked because I just wanted, you got to make sure of these things, because somebody could have seen it already and it's buried into something,
The gray litter, something like that. Yeah.
No, not at all. So once I verified all of that and even remembered what my hypothesis for my dissertation was, the Coso rock art represent a visual cultural continuity that spread across. I was like, yeah, I guess it did.
Yeah, no joke.
Yeah, I proved it like in aces. I'm like, can I finish now? I don't want to write anymore. That's it, right? Like, oh yeah, you gotta write some more. But those are the kind of discoveries that I was making in just trying to, by going back and forth. First, immediately I established what I call the expanded study area. I'm like, there's no way I'm going to get what I need from COSO just from COSO. I could probably read all maybe 200 top articles by various, and they'll all be highly specialized and, experimental. I don't know. But as far as meat and vetted and like deep with like ideas and examples, it was going to have to be the Four Corners region and Southwest. And of course, they're adjacent to each other. And once I saw that the rock art itself was so obviously connected, ergo, the cultural histories are going to be just as influential. So to try to look at that and kind of substantiate that more, I turned my research to oral traditions and creation myths. And then bananas again. Found so many examples, literally like the exact same sort of creation myth. David Myers writes a great paper on them. He has a great name for him too. He calls it Key Variant Myth 1. And when he calls it that, it's a creation myth or some particular story, but it's like the mold of the myth, and then you can see all the cultural variations. But they have to hit like all these or do some sort of variation of these very particular things that happened in this myth. And when they do, then he calls that a key variant. And COSO's has one of the key variants in it, which is a coyote and how he populates the world.
So basically you have like these at least two lines of evidence suggesting that there's not cultures dying out, between 15,000 years and almost, 1,000 to 500 years ago. There's these exchange of knowledge, exchange of stories between those times, and there's not really a disconnect between the two.
Exactly. I mean, there's the only thing that's disconnected just would be how it varies, how meaning might change or metaphor, but like the greater metaphors kind of stay there, but how people understand that metaphor may change, but that's just all the variation, but the structure remains, and that's what we know about myth. Like, Levi Strauss said, all is myth. And you can learn everything from myth. And so when you can, and so I tend to look at these three things here, it's something I think one of my heroes, Julian Stewart, would have approved of. And funny enough, I think it was kind of a blessing when I got my first copy of the COSO. I was already a Julian Stewart fangirl by this point, but when I opened up my first copy of that book and the foreword was written by Julian the Man Stewart, I nearly lost my mind. I was like, no way. This one-off book that no one, he did California, but like still it was, and this is nearly almost towards the end of his life. And his quote, I use it in my dissertation, it's one of his last lines. He goes, much that will not be found in the ground will be found on these walls.
Wow.
Yes.
Boaz and Boaz's students had a lot of prophetic stuff to say.
If we could do, the archaeology or the anthropology that Julian Stewart was talking about, with kind of
Hello.
Yeah, I mean, like his original, like living with, tribes. I guess you could still do that today.
Well, no, but what Julian does is even more so. Here's what their issue is. Okay, so we're going to get a little controversial. And listen, for my MA thesis, I was floored. The way they do it in England, you get blind readers, so it's not anyone in your department. Of course, someone there reads it, of course, but you have like 4 readers, and only one comes from the department, and that's like your supervisor or whatever, and the other 3 are blind. I pulled somehow Jose Oliver, who's a huge anthropologist, big time, and he actually was the one that wrote my critique, that you actually get a full critique, and he compared it to he's like, this is like neo-functionalist at its highest. He goes, it's a more sophisticated version, he goes, of Crow. I'm like, what? Yeah. Because people used to give me, they're like, how can you be so artsy but also so like hyper functionalist at the same time? And I'm just like, because it's form and function, I don't want to trade one for the other. I can get so specific, and so like that. I guess that also helped me with COSO, because I'm used to looking for structures and being able to assume. And that was Julian Stewart's thing. He wanted to find what he called the cultural types. I mean, that's why he's, cultural ecology, he's credited with, forming, and I believe it. But he set out some truths that a culture in a particular environment and a particular time are going to have similar products of culture, because the environment influences them, how they interpret or the variations of those products. Yes, it could be infinite, but you should be able to recognize desert cultures from mountain cultures. And I think we can. At that time, I just think, his ideas, of course, were, to me, both obvious, but also at the same time, I guess, ahead of his time for those people. I think he also had a bit of Asperger's, because he didn't really care about, they always thought he was being offensive. I just thought he was just being blunt, And they're like, how can you say that? I'm like, I think it was just when he came about, we were still, as anthropology as a discipline overall, we were just coming out of our, really dark past of anthropometry, Victorian racism, and proto-Nazism, using anthropology to basically further race agendas. You go back to the earliest models we did. What was it? Savagery, barbarism, civilization. All in a row.
Yeah, the Morgan or whatever. And
so anytime, and then, you would have the grand sweeping cultural histories. But so we had so much shame for that. It's like, rather than going, we screwed up, take it on the chin, they just decided to throw the baby out with the bathwater, especially in American archaeology or, Northern Hemisphere. Everything became so highly specialized. Every culture was a unique snowflake unto its own. Couldn't make any real generalities. They were all frowned upon. And basically, he, just that hyper individualism, then, combine that with, the Red Scare and what we were doing in the United States, in the 50s too. I mean, Marx was not even allowed to be taught here. And professors lost their jobs and tenured and got snitched on for, forever, until, I guess the madness, but it had a whole generation of Americans still up until this day. Now we're just starting to talk about Marx again, but 50 years, 40 years, where you just weren't allowed to talk about commonality,
Yeah, absolutely.
And, and it gave us also this kind of fake sort of archaeological lens that, as if all these cultures lived in isolation. I mean, you think about today. I mean, maybe they don't have the numbers that we have today, but everything's relative. You know what I mean? And given the fact that when we look at remains of cultures and we can see the overlaps of spirit, they just, you just can't imagine, the Hopi not knowing the Ute lived north of them. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
But we tend to discuss archaeology in that way in the States. I rarely do you come across a paper that's discussing one group or whatever that ever even mentions possible interactions or influences with others.
Do you think modern state or political boundaries influence that a lot?
Oh, hell yeah. Hell yeah. Oh God, to me, it's one of the dumbest things ever. But I'm like, how can you put your contemporary nationalistic arbitrary beefs on the past? You're like, sorry, that wasn't Georgia 15,000 years ago. So why are you fighting about it now? Yeah, it's the same way with Clovis. We hung on to that for so freaking long. We ignored Monteverde in Chile, even though the international community, they invited a lot of American archaeologists to come test their material in their caves. And some went, but then they weren't listened to really. International community went, verified so many times, 30,000 years old. 30,000 in Chile. Clovis Folsom, 13 to 14. And then then they got all excited when we found, Meadowlark?
Meadowcroft.
Yeah, what that brought it up to 16 or something?
Yeah, but I know the guy that used to teach that got me into archaeology, he was out of Osio's grad student when they opened up Meadowcroft.
Uh-huh.
And so you got to work there. And I know some of the radiocarbon dates from Meadowcroft are getting wonky. And every time they redate it, it gets a little bit closer to us in time.
Yeah, and the thing is, it's so still there's this excitement, but yet no one wants to address the humongous Chilean-sized elephant in the room that the oldest occupations occurred at the southernmost point of our hemisphere. I mean, immediately it destroys the Barren Landing.
Yeah, 100%.
In one fell swoop, Clovis Folsom, it's okay, not why, and I just don't think why we keep clinging. To me, it stunts knowledge. We know, I don't know if it's common knowledge, but there are 2 migrations out of Africa, 2 human migrations, right?
Mm-hmm.
OAH1.
There's so much evidence to suggest that there were multiple migrations to the New World at multiple times from multiple points of departure. The Bering Landing, that idea, because, just, I guess, using reason alone, why would the first pioneers, immigrants coming over this bridge, why would they wait till going all the way down to Chile before setting up camp, a stationary enough camp? And then I'll even go one further. When we look at complex civ and high population densities and what we consider complex civ, they're all in South and Central America. They're not in the North. How could they aggregate so just hugely? Not just a couple of, thatched huts and stuff, or even a big midden. Massive cities, super old, but they're all South.
I think you're bringing up these really interesting points, and I think at David asking that question is that that's got to be a North American archaeology
bias.
Bias. Absolutely.
Yeah. Unnecessary bias.
Yeah. And on that note, if there are still any North American archaeologists listening, please hope you do.
Get that!
We will catch you in segment 3.
And we are back with segment 3 of episode 33 of A Life in Ruins podcast. So, Dr. Molinar, what got you into archaeology to begin with?
Okay, let's see. So, I mean, I was always that kid that was into everything. I'm coming to realize, I'm kind of saying it without hubris or even conceit. I was also really good at everything, which made it hard to choose anything, But what did I keep coming back to were just wondering, big ideas, what ifs, things that I knew that I couldn't just immediately kind of just find out about, or conundrums. One of my first, I guess, daydream jobs, God, it had to be like an elementary school. I wanted to be an archaeologist, but an astronaut that studied ruins on other planets.
That'd be awesome. I wish that was a thing. Sign me up.
I remember one of my first archaeology teachers like, what, our artifacts weren't good enough? I'm like, I guess so. Like, I don't want to use Earth ruins. I want alien ruins. Yeah. And so, but then you kind of would go in and out as you do as a kid, all these different ideas. But again, I would always come back to the ideas of mystery and travel and the unknown. So it's even to this day, it's a love affair between space and the past, which I learned recently from a beautiful documentary from Chile called Nostalgia de la Luz, which means nostalgia for the light, where they actually say that astronomers and archaeologists are very similar, not only in the fact that what they're looking at is the past. Because if we look at the night sky, remember, those are the stars from that's the light from millions of years ago. So every time you look at the night sky, you're looking into the past. So astronomers and archaeologists, we definitely share that. What else did he say that was kind of sad, but also meaningful? He's like, and we also have to deal with the sorrow of what we study we'll never be able to really experience, which is true.
Absolutely.
We'll never really be there, and it will always be from that distance. But even with that being said, I just, I learned that sadness long ago. I mean, much later. But I was always interested in both the night sky and stars, but also like in the ancient mysteries. Then you kind of get a little, I started getting a little thoughtful in middle school. And it dawned on me, because I am first generation of African descent. My family's from Panama, Central America. And me and my brother and sister and my my second cousin, all of us are all first generation, like family en masse immigrated, And so when we talk about the other, in social theory or whatever, I mean, I've been the other my entire life, but I'm the other that I'm both the other and the one, because I was born in the United States. I was raised in American culture, but at the same time, I come from this other place. Yet, when we're sitting in a classroom and when you're kind of first introduced to any kind of history as a student, it's in elementary school. And what always stuck with me was the Hispanic or Native American history begins with conquest and genocide. The African American experience begins with slavery and genocide. And the white American experience starts off with revolution and heroism and, manifest destiny. And I knew I needed to know that wasn't all there is. That what happened before that? We are all conquered or enslaved or just outright murdered. And so you think about these fourth graders or even third graders, 9-year-olds, reading these books, looking around the classroom at each other as the teacher and the book is telling them, when they're looking at anything about white Americans, it's the revolution and Paul Revere and George Washington and freedom, and then slavery, Indian genocide, and the conquest of the Southern and Mesoamericans. And and being one of those conquered people, then also being a female and Black, there's all sorts of kinds of, you always feel like we're always pressured to speak for everybody, like as if, what we say, it's always this consequence. Well, you fuck up. We're never going to get another Black person in here again. We're never going to let another girl in here again. So it's like you're always got the pressure on you to, whatever you do, everyone's going to assume it of everybody else. Cliche in the reverse, right? You create the cliche. So if I was going to be under that pressure anyway, I wanted to know something different. I needed to know something before that story. If I was going to have to carry that story the rest of my life, I wanted to know something else. When it became refined for me that I definitely was going to be heading into anthro, and I remember this so specifically, it was 8th grade, advanced world history. And I sat down, our teacher had put the books on the desk already, and I always read everything first if it's in front of me. And I remember opening the book, turning to the first page, getting through all that, whatever, and the first words I saw was Australopithecine afarensis. And I had never even seen this word, heard this word anytime before. So I continue reading, and I go, and my teacher's name, because this moment was so poignant for me, Miss Silverstein. I'm like, Mrs. Silverstein, so we're going to study history of early humans before actual humans? She said, yes. And I was like, so there was the world. There was that unknown world all of a sudden that I'd always been looking for, that I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm going to literally learn something new.
This was in middle school?
Yeah, 8th grade.
Eighth grade. Wow. That's awesome.
Yeah, it was an honors advanced, it was advanced world history. The only few of us in there. And I'll always thank her because I've talked to peers who had that, and they're like, that wasn't in our book. And, I credit Miss Silverstein with choosing that text. But she's like, she goes, I've never had a student go jump in it like that before. But it blew my mind that we were literally going to start history in proto-human history.
Yeah, I think that was my freshman year of high school. I had that same experience that we started with Australopithecines, and that's where World History 1 started. And I think it ended near Renaissance. Yeah, that sounds about right. But I remember that I had that same experience. I remember my teacher too, because I was so involved, especially with Neanderthals. This is the first time we ever learned about Neanderthals, and I was just fascinated.
Right? It's like someone just peeling back a curtain, You're like, wow, there's all of this too, and we're connected to it. And just, what in the world can we, but, you go back and forth, I went to performing arts high school where my art teacher was gutted because, my track coach was the most gutted. She cried because the performing arts school did not have a sports program. I'm really good at track and soccer. That's it. Even though I have the height for basketball, I just can't take people being that close to me. So when you're running, run faster. No one will get you. So it was a good fit. And then my art professor, I applied for the school. I did drama and I applied for art. I got into both. I decided to go for theater. And by the beginning even of my 11th grade year, I was so disenchanted. I was like, what sucks about theater? And I wish I would have went with art. I'm like, theater is the only one of these disciplines that you need an audience for. And I did not want to have a life at all that demanded an audience for it to actually exist. You know, you can dance for yourself, you can draw for yourself, you can play an instrument for yourself, but you just really can't act for yourself, can you?
No, 100%.
You can't do it. Yeah, so kind of got, just kind of trudged my way on through. And when I decided to go back to college, I was like waiting tables, saw this woman that came in, older woman, like a hippie. I should have, now I know she had read professor of anthropology all over her. But at the time, I was just tripped out looking lady, and she was with this man who was just very obviously Mexican in traditional dress and everything. So they made the oddest couple, and they were seated in my section. And I mean, I just was fascinated staring at them. So I just couldn't help myself. I'm like, can you please tell me? I don't even know how I said it, but I just asked. I'm like, who are you? Like, what do you all do? Explain to me this, this is. She goes, well, I'm at University of Miami. I'm a professor of anthropology. He's a professor of anthropology from the University of Mexico. He's here visiting. And I was like, that's so freaking cool. Like, I was so stoked. And so I told her, I was like, yeah, I've thought about studying it on and off. And she goes, well, I'm going to ask you one question. And I'm like, well, okay, go for it. She goes, what do you love more, the living or the dead? I was like, the dead, easily. She goes, you're an archaeologist. And she was right. I believed her ever since. I mean, I've tried anthropology several times. As an undergrad, my advisor in the good old days of UF, because I'm a UF alumni twice now, which is kind of weird. Did my undergraduate there and did my PhD, but master's in London. But the time gulf between it was that. And it was a whole, if I may make a, obvious joke, whatever, different culture in the Department of Culture. It was like, I was actually really gutted. I was saddened. I was disturbed. It was nothing like it was when Dr. Alan Burns was the chair there. So he started off as a linguist, and he got into visual anthropology, which is something we both share a love for, both practice. And then he took that even further and became one of the most revered applied anthropologists. He just started fighting for the rights of the people that he used to study linguistically and film, in documentary style. He started fighting for their legal rights using anthropology. And he's a freaking superhero, He's a superhero. And he was my advisor, my undergraduate advisor, like that. Yet I was, archaeology bound. And it was that kind of, we really would intersect in a four discipline kind of way, not just kind of go hide off in our own little sub cubbies or something, But when I came back, I mean, it was just basically the opposite. It kind of reminded me of the United States. It's like whatever sub-discipline was in power, AKA the chair of the department, that's where everything went to, and that's all they cared about. So you had to hope, all right, hold on, let's get an archaeologist this year. Come on, please, Or the physical anthropology or the bio people are like, no, bio, we need bio. Come on. It's been a long time. Linguistics is ever since Alan Byrne, we're not even trying anymore. We give up. You don't care. Maybe the real linguistics department will take us. But yeah, that's just how it came, it came into be. I mean, I was said after because they're like, you're super theoretical, and then you want to do comparative, and and we just find that to be, how are you going to be able to demonstrate? How are you even, it was just so weird. It was just, I'm like, well, the first thing I felt was didn't you guys request a copy of my MA as part of my application? Did anybody actually read what my degree is in? Comparative art and archaeology. And then and then when they were like, wow, you're a little wild, you're a little raw, you're a little forgetful, all over the place. And I'm like, well, then I definitely know you guys did not read my recommendation letters, because then you would have seen Dr. Jeremy Tanner from England say, Marissa benefits the most from close supervision. No lie, it's in there. We had a good laugh. He's like, it's true though. I'm like, I know it's true. I'm not one of those people that deny that I need management. I'm not a good self-manager. It's just the anthropology always has something, as long as humans have interacted with it in any way, shape, or form, there is a question there that is suitable to anthropology. And so that's why I'm stuck with her, we could do price or selection of, commercial car tires by men ages 20 to 45 in Detroit, 1955 to 67. That's a PhD in anthropology.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so, to me, I'm like, if that kind of discipline, yeah, that's definitely for me, whatever I can ever think of. And I can think of a lot of things. And yet I could, kind of sort of justify study for it.
Mm-hmm.
I think I got a PhD in slinging the bull and doodling.
I love that. I love that description of anthropology as something that it'll always be relevant, always around, and always have questions.
Yes, it will always produce questions. You can always find something to think about under that in anthropology.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I know the answer to this question already, because you seem to love what you do and love what you study. But because this is the show, A Life in Ruins, I have to ask you this question. So, Marissa, if given the chance again, would you still choose to live a life in ruins?
Man, I've been thinking about that a lot lately. You know why? Yeah. So my buddy Scotty, who I used to do my archaeology with, all right, he got married recently. But while we were in our PhD program at UF, she was about 10 years younger than us. She wrote her name with little hearts for the I part. And she had just graduated from dental surgery school and was making like $500,000. And we're like, and she signs her name with heart eyes. You're like, she didn't write a dissertation? No. Oh my goodness. So yeah, in those moments, I do sometimes question. But you know what? No. The only thing I could say is I would have continued. I would have established a good side hustle earlier.
All right. All right.
But I would never have changed it. I filled my first passport when I was 27.
Oh boy.
I'm Indiana Jones type archaeologist.
All right.
Earlier today, I said Boaz and his students always had a lot to say. I was implying that Julian Stewart was one of Boaz's students. He was not. I don't know why I said that. Sounds wrong.
No, he's not. I was wondering where you were going with Boaz. I was like, was I talking about Stewart? But hey, you know what? I got some good Boazian quotes too. For a while there, I was drinking the Kool-Aid where people were kind of like, Boazian's just a little too like crunchy granola, flaky. But then he kind of, reading some short sections of him, kind of bringing back some humanity to my practice of archaeology. Like, it made me actually care about living people for a change for a minute. Because that's why I stopped doing the Maya, is because the Maya started seeming like Tuesday in America. The elite crushing the poor and the middle class, natural resource depletion because of monumentality, inner warfare. Nothing's changed. Buy, sell, and so I had to go back to my original love, which was earliest humans.
Well, sounds good. Well, everyone, we just interviewed Dr. Marissa Molinar. You can find her on Instagram at Maybe Like Water and Facebook by searching her name, Dr. Marissa Molinar. And with that, we are out. Thanks for listening to A Life in Ruins podcast.
You can follow us on Instagram and Facebook at A Life in Ruins Podcast, and you can also email us at alifeinruinspodcast@gmail.com.
And remember, make sure to bring your archaeologists in from the cold and feed them beer. All right, so this is Connor's crappy joke time. So this is a simple question. What did the archaeologist find?
Not a well-paying career.
Himself?
No on both accounts, but those are both hilarious. He won't tell me, but he said it's groundbreaking.
Oh, boo. All right. We're really cut out.
All right.
This show is produced by the Archaeology Podcast Network, Chris Webster and Tristan Boyle in Reno, Nevada at the Reno Collective.
This has been a presentation of the Archaeology Podcast Network. Visit us on the web for show notes and other podcasts at www.archpodnet.com. Contact us at chris@archaeologypodcastnetwork.com.